Well, thank you so much for coming out this morning. I'm sure all of you have had very long days, so appreciate you making the time. Just want to say how proud I am to be the next member of Congress from Michigan's 3rd Congressional District. I want to thank first and foremost my wife Gabriella, who's been by our side this entire time and has put in incredible work and effort, and wanted to make you proud. I want to thank the rest of our family, the rest of our team, and all of our supporters here in West Michigan. I also want to thank Hillary Skolton for calling last night. We had a good conversation, and I congratulated her on running a strong and spirited campaign. And also thank Justin Amash for reaching out. Representative Amash expressed his well wishes, and that he also wanted to make sure that we had a successful transition, and we're well prepared in order to make sure that West Michigan has the representation that it deserves. You know, we got into this race almost 500 days ago, so we're excited to see it through to a successful conclusion now. I'm proud that we had a very polite night in West Michigan. I'm grateful for our county clerks, for our township clerks, for all of the folks who participated in the electoral process, from those who are volunteering and staffing at the polls to those who assisted in the counting in West Michigan as well. And also want to reiterate the same thing that I've said when I'm knocking on a door that may have one of my opponent's signs on it. We want to make sure we're representing everybody in West Michigan, not just not just those who voted for us, but everybody who's here, because that's ultimately the job at the end of the day of our representative in Congress. You know, like I said, we got into this race almost 500 days ago, and it was with a clear mission to return strong, stable, and effective representation to West Michigan. The values of limited government, of economic freedom, of individual liberty, those have been the foundation for our nation's success. I've spent several years as a combatant in Iraq, as a civilian non-combatant in Afghanistan, working on humanitarian aid operations, and saw how what our government does or doesn't do, lives hang in the balance. And we've also seen in COVID, how important it is that we have effective leadership at the local level, how important it is that we push decision-making down and empower every element of our government. So I'm excited to get to work on those ends. I'm excited to get to work to make sure that we have an affordable healthcare system that lives up to the promises that our people should expect. I'm excited to work to make sure that we protect the Great Lakes and tackle the climate crisis. I'm excited to work on ending our endless wars and making sure that America's national security and our national defense apparatus are well positioned to deal with what we're focusing on today. But also at the end of the day, to make sure that West Michigan has the support, it has the representation that it needs to thrive. Because at the end of the day, and this is something I talked about with both Ms. Skolton and Representative Amash, we may differ in approaches, but we all want to see West Michigan thrive and succeed. So we're looking forward to working with folks across the aisle to make sure that happens, to working with everyone from township officials to city officials to county officials to state officials to make sure that that happens and ensure that West Michigan has the representation it needs in Washington, D.C. So thank you all. I'll take time for a few questions. No, I don't know if we had an order, if it was more proper.
We're going to start with ZZM. So ZZM wants to start? No, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
No questions? All right, Fox 17.
How encouraging is it to get congratulations to both Skolton and Amash heading into the office for the first time?
I was very humbled and proud by that. Again, it was a very polite night in West Michigan. And as I said earlier, I think we're all in alignment that we may differ on not that we may differ on approach and philosophy, but we want to make sure that West Michigan succeeds and that the people of West Michigan have the support and representation they deserve.
All right, Wood?
As one of the Republican victors in the state, what are your remarks on the way things are being handled right now as far as the tone nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're we're going to have to wait and see. You know, the legal process will do its job. We've often seen in close races that it comes down to that, and that's not a failure of the process. That's the process working. That's making sure that everything is transparent and above board, and at the end of the day accountable, because it's incredibly important that all Americans have faith in the electoral system. So, you know, I don't want to comment too much on things that are developing. Hopefully we'll see a bit more progress there soon.
As far as the tightness of so many of the races statewide and nationally too, what's your take on the delayed results with an absentee ballot?
Yeah, we knew there'd be some delays. Obviously this race, you know, we had many returns late Tuesday night, but it took until, you know, Wednesday around 6 or 7 o'clock for the city of Grand Rapids to process its final batch of absentee ballots. Again, it obviously would have been more exciting to have everything on election night, but I think it's most important that every vote is counted and counted accurately as well. So if that means having to exercise some patience, so be it. Thank you.
Awesome. WAMT?
Peter, you just said every vote should be counted and counted fairly and accurately. The President of the United States has called for the counting to stop. Do you agree with that?
You know, I'll fall back on what I said a little bit ago in terms of making sure the process is seen through and in a legal way, right? That's what we've seen in plenty of contested and close races in the past. I know that there are plenty of much more knowledgeable lawyers on electoral process and law that are going to be wading through the issues, figuring out, you know, where some legitimate issues may be and where it may have just been an appearance. So we will see what that means in the coming days. But again, I think it's important that at the end of the day, we let that process work through, that we have the legal process that's worked through as well.
Sweet. All right, Arpon?
Hey, Peter, you know, things, like you said, are still developing, but it appears that next year when we get to Washington, government will still be divided. Do you have any thoughts just about, you know, kind of being able to work to get stuff done and when you get to Congress?
You know, most of my professional background has been in places that are not the best functioning. Baghdad, Kabul, disaster zones. So I'm a little bit optimistic that I'll find a higher functioning DC, even if that's a very low bar. I think divided government, especially the Republican Senate majority being held, that'll be a strong encouragement to look for bipartisan solutions, to look for compromise and things that can work across the aisle. So I'm optimistic.
All right, finally, Brian.
Peter, you know, 3rd Congressional District has long been called a Republican stronghold. You were obviously victorious, but it was a pretty close race. What does that say to you about the district and how it's changing? And is it no longer a Republican stronghold in your opinion?
You know, I think the Cook, was it Political Values Indicator, PVI, it says an R+6, and we won by 6. So it kind of hit the baseline there. That was, you should never take an electorate for granted. You should never take a district for granted. We saw that from the very beginning. That's one of the reasons why our messaging was consistent all the way back to July of 2019 until now. And it will remain consistent going forward.
All right, did I miss anybody?
Yeah, Peter, your campaign ran at least a different tone than what we heard from the president. You called on some different spirits in the Republican Party. You talked about, you know, Vern Ehlers and Paul Henry.
And Jerry Ford, who had a Quonset hut in 1948 when he ran for Congress for the first time. I should have explained the backdrop a little bit more. But.
So you head to Washington, and it looks by all indicators that the president will have lost Michigan. He will have lost some key states, even if he pulls out a victory. What's your message to other Republicans as you head to Washington about how to be a Republican these days?
Well, again, I can speak for myself in our race. I don't think that one electoral victory allows me to stand up and prognosticate too widely. But you know, when I was speaking earlier, it was about getting back to those core values of limited government, economic freedom, and individual liberty. And I think folks may differ in tone, they may differ in style. when it comes to those values, I think that's where common ground can be found, and that's what I oftentimes fall back on. But at the end of the day, every candidate, no matter the office, is going to run their own race. We ran ours, and like you mentioned, we wanted to do so in a way that reflected the spirit and the representation that Paul Henry, Vern Ehlers, and Jerry Ford had brought to this district before.
Can I ask a
Sure.
You'll also be one of the youngest members of Congress. What do you say to the old hats there?
Yeah, Madison Cawthorn really showed me up. He's going to be 25. I think he just turned 25. Maybe the first member of Congress born in 1988. He's the first born in the 90s. When Justin Amash took this seat 10 years ago, I think he was 31, I believe. So, we've seen definitely this cycle, and I have to give a lot of credit to Republican leadership in the House, to Leader McCarthy and Whip Scalise. What was supposed to be a very bad night for congressional Republicans, with I think it was projected to be a 5 to 15 seat loss, ended up being at least a 7 to potentially 10 or 12 seat gain. So there were a lot of folks who were working hard, no matter what the polling or media sentiment may have been saying. Oh yeah, I think it was every seat that was flipped was either a person of color, a woman, or a veteran, or some combination of the three. So I think it's important that the Republican Party looks more like the country as a whole, and that we also have our government that reflects more of the people it seeks to represent. So I'm excited to bring some young energy and young perspectives, and again, awareness of the concerns of younger generations that are worried about student debt, that are worried about the healthcare, housing, and education costs, that are making it more and more challenging for them to have access to the American dream and a good life that's affordable.
All right, any final questions?
Have you heard from any of the other Republican candidates, such as Upton or Huizenga? Congratulations for offering words of advice.
Yes, I've been fortunate to have had folks on both sides of the aisle reach out. Congressman Upton has been very generous with his perspective, advice, and experience, as has Congressman Huizenga. So looking forward to working together with representatives from the 2nd and the 6th Congressional District, because we share a lot of the same. I think when West Michigan and Southwest Michigan and parts of Central Michigan, when we're speaking with one voice, it'll be much more resonating and effective on the national stage.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you all so much for coming out. I hope you guys get some rest, and what's been a certainly very long week. And just as a final note, just want to thank again the Joel Hondorp, the clerk of the City of Grand Rapids, and the Kent County Clerk Lisa Lyons Postumus. I know this has been a stressful 36 hours for them, and just again appreciate everyone involved in the process who devoted their time, their talents, and their energy to making sure that all their votes were counted here in West Michigan. Thank you.